you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, and Inaya Falarin Iman on your TV and on your radio. We're here all the way through to midday with a show full of all of today's stories and lots of discussion on the issues of the day, Downing Street, Russia, and of course the cost of living squeeze.
Absolutely, make sure that you get in touch with your views as usual. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We'll be getting through all of those throughout the show. But first, as usual, here's the latest news.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson has reportedly been hit by the resignation of a fifth advisor just hours after 4 key aides quit. Conservative Home Editor Paul Goodman claims that Eleanor Narizanski has left her role as a special advisor in the policy unit. Yesterday, Boris Johnson lost his Chief of Staff, Principal Private Secretary, Director of Communications and Policy Chief. Former Conservative Red Wall advisor Oscar Redrop told GB News the next couple of days will be crucial for the Prime Minister.
What's really key here, because it was chaotic yesterday, even though we knew this was coming, the root and branch change at number 10 were coming, it was managed very chaotically. The appointments in the next few days, they have to be spot on.
The Conservatives have won the Southend West by-election, prompted by the killing of Sir David Amess. The 69-year-old was fatally stabbed during a constituency surgery in Leigh-on-Sea in October last year. He'd represented the seat since 1997. The contest saw a low turnout of 24%. The other major parties, Labour, the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, chose not to stand. That paved the way for Tory candidate Anna Firth to gain 86% of the vote.
Sir David was a truly exceptional MP. He was a friend to all, and he had a huge impact on everyone who lives here.
The government's been told to focus on getting the UK off the gas grid and to invest in energy efficiency to reduce bills. That's the message from E.ON's UK boss. It follows regulator Ofgem's announcement yesterday that energy prices will soar by 54% from April. The hike will affect 22 million households and add up to £693 to annual bills. Electrical engineer Lynette Marsden told GB News hers will go up by at least 153%. Now her provider's gone bust. She thinks all the competition's been taken out of the marketplace.
Yesterday you were reporting of Shell making £12 billion profit in the last quarter of last year. Scottish Power, I know, were fined £18 million in 2016 for poor customer service. It's just disgusting that these companies are allowed to charge users extraordinate amount for the energy and make huge profits, get fined for performing poorly. And I'm calling, and I've emailed the Energy Secretary about this, that the whole system needs reform, and I want an investigation into it.
Stormont has lost its governing powers after the DUP First Minister stepped down over the post-Brexit agreement. Paul Given claims the Northern Ireland Protocol's destabilising peace. Under power-sharing rules, his resignation automatically removed Sinn Féin Deputy First Minister Michelle O'Neill from her position. The Foreign Secretary is condemning reports that Russia is planning to fabricate an attack on by Ukraine, giving President Vladimir Putin an excuse to invade. US reports claim Moscow planned to use a fake video of a Ukrainian military attack on Russian speakers. The video would have included actors and elaborate props. Liz Truss says it's clear and shocking evidence of Russia's unprovoked aggression. The first patients have undergone pioneering robotic surgery to treat throat cancer. Dubbed transoral robotic surgery, or TORS, a surgeon uses a high-tech computer system to guide surgical tools and examine cancerous tissues. The breakthrough at Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow means some patients will be able to avoid radiotherapy altogether. Prince Harry has admitted experiencing burnout. In an interview for a mental health company, the Duke of Sussex said he's felt like he was getting to the very end of everything he had and been forced to look inside himself. The Duke also stressed the importance of self-care, but admitted it can be difficult to find the time.
Any fuel or any steam in the engine just was like, I was burning the candle at both ends and it's like, boom. That is when you are forced to look inside yourself, because with everything else around you, seemingly you feel as though it's working against you. The only way that you can really combat it and the only way you can build resilience for the outside world and your entire environment is the inner work.
8 new stamps have been released by the Royal Mail to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee on Sunday. The set features photographs throughout the decades illustrating her dedication to service and her changing fashion over the years. The Queen is just 2 days away from becoming the first British sovereign in history to reach 70 years on the throne. And the opening ceremony for the Winter Olympics begins in just over an hour's time at Beijing's Bird's Nest Stadium. The Games will be taking place inside a so-called closed loop due to COVID-19. Competitors will be kept away from the public and only small selected audiences will be allowed to attend. The UK is not sending diplomats to the Games as part of a boycott due to alleged human rights abuses in China, which Beijing strongly denies. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now it's back to Tom and Anaya and to the point.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Anaya, eamonn and Tom Harwood on your TV and on your radio. We've got a show full of all of today's big stories and lots of discussion on the issues that you care about, so here's what's on the menu.
Britain suffers so-called Black Thursday after energy bills increase by £700 and soaring interest rates lead to the UK's biggest fall in living standards ever. Let us know how you feel about this and how this is affecting you by getting in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Indeed. Meanwhile, the number of aides who have resigned from Downing Street reportedly reaches 5 after the Prime Minister's advisor on women and equalities resigns. We'll get the latest on what this means for the future of Boris Johnson.
Also coming up in the show, we'll speak to a trucker who is part of the anti-vaccine mandate Freedom Convoy to find out why Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has refused to meet these protesters.
Indeed, we have all that coming up and much more across the programme, so make sure they get in touch with your views, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Well, British families are facing their tightest financial squeeze yet, as energy bills will soar by nearly £700 come April. Not only this, but yesterday the Bank of England raised interest rates to 0.5%. That's doubling them, increasing mortgage costs for homeowners. Chancellor Rishi Sunak unveiled a multi-billion-pound package to try to soften the blow yesterday. But will it be enough to help us cope with the cost of living crisis, as well as his impending hike in national insurance tax? Plus, will it be inflationary in and of itself? Well, our London reporter Alice Porter joins us live from the borough of Brent, one of the most deprived areas of the UK, to get residents' views on the cost of living crisis.
Alice, thank you for joining us this morning. Let's talk a bit about the energy price cap increase.
Hi there, good morning. Yes, I mean, bills had been rising steadily for a number of months, and that's mainly due to the fact that the price of gas had gone up significantly. And then yesterday, of course, we had this announcement from Ofgem that said the energy price cap would go up by 54%, which is a record-breaking increase. Now, Rishi Sunak, he's announced a number of support packages to help families, but the Prime Minister himself, he's admitted that around half of these are loans, and the real concern is that how this is going to impact some of the poorest families in the country. I was out and about yesterday speaking to people to get their reaction to the news about the energy cap price increase, and this is what they had to say.
I think it's going to be really difficult for people who are already stretched, and they've got other stretchers coming up as well. I think it's going to be really hard. Everything's gone up, and this is a massive rise. Some people will not be able to afford it.
It's like a race to the bottom, isn't it, with the energy companies? I mean, we put them in, they allow competition for gas, electricity, but none of them could afford to hedge. So it was like they were offering low prices, and then as soon as the prices went up, they hadn't hedged on them, so they couldn't afford to sell it anymore. So here we all are in a spiral of increasing prices.
I think it's a great idea to do that rebate, but the rebate is needed now, when everybody is heating their home over the winter months. So they need it now, not in 2 or 3 months' time, when their heating bills have gone down.
Well, I've got a fixed price till December, but the cap, we're talking £600-700 a year increase in the price of electric or gas. And then you've got fuel, which is absolutely astronomical at the moment. Top that with the VAT increase, and people's wages just aren't going up, so it's going to hit people hard. I'm trying to save a few bob here and there. Whether it gets worse or not, I'm not too bad at the moment, but yeah, everyone's feeling the pinch, I think, and people are just going to stop perhaps going out or shirk on heating or, sell the car or something.
And Alice, that man that you had in the Vox Pop said that it's not just energy bills going up, it's other things as well too. There's many things, it seems, that are squeezing ordinary people right now.
Absolutely, that's correct. I mean, wholesale oil prices have gone up, so we all know it's much more expensive to fill up your car than it was a year ago. Shop price inflation almost doubled in January. We've got national insurance going up in April. So the problem is people's wages are just simply not going up in line with these increase in prices. And that's why we've had the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, who's come out and said that he expects this squeeze on the cost of living and the squeeze on people's living standards will sadly is expected to continue until next year. And there's been a number of stark warnings from charities who are very concerned about who this is going to impact, and particularly those who are from the poorest backgrounds.
It is such a tricky time for so many people. Alice, obviously you're in London at the moment, which is seen by many as the most affluent area in the UK. But there's a lot of diversity within London itself as well. Will people in London be able to weather the storm better than other parts of the country?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, Tom, because obviously there's been lots of discussions about levelling up. And of course, as you're saying there, yes, London is seen as one of the more affluent areas of the UK. But it's still important to stress that there are significant areas of deprivation in London and the South East. I mean, I'm in the borough of Brent right now, and this is one of the poorest boroughs that in London. And what you're seeing here is that the average UK salary, the average salary of people in Brent is about £25,000. But the average property price in Brent is over £600,000. And that's the issue particularly that you're dealing with in London, is rent prices and property prices are so high. Now, over the last sort of 6 months or so, we've seen an increase in property prices across the country. And actually, in regards to that, London has been the least affected. It's been more likely that we've seen price increases in the southwest. But there's still an enormous gulf in house prices in London compared to the average price in the rest of England. So, for example, the average price of a property in London is almost 3 times that in the north of England. And so many people struggle to pay their mortgages and struggling to pay their rent. And it forces a lot of even professionals such as myself, you get forced out of London. And the problem is with that is then you're faced with very high commuting costs. The most expensive commuting costs across the UK are people who are travelling into London, with the average person paying about £5,000, which is really, really significant. And the concern is next month, guess what? Those prices in your rail fares are about to go up, and that's been told by the Department for Transport. So, as I was saying, I think it's important when we're having these conversations about wealth across the UK that, yes, London may be seen as more affluent, but there are some real issues to do with deprivation, and the cost of living, particularly in terms of housing and transport, is very significant.
Yeah, it's such a tricky issue. Alice, thank you so much for that report. It's really important that we don't forget London here. We don't try and be London-centric, but also it is a very important part of the country. The population is more than Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland put together.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I think Alice is absolutely right about how this is affecting ordinary people. And I think many of the justifications that we see, for example, the green levy and the green taxes, is to protect future generations. But I saw a tweet the other day, which I thought was very true, that we're not going to have a future generation if all of the young people are not going to have children because they can't afford to even, get on the property ladder.
This is a drum I keep banging. I have written about this a number of times. People want to have children in this country, but they feel like they can't afford it. They feel like they're priced out, particularly with regard to housing. It's such a shame.
Absolutely.
That
And I
the
think
government abandoned housing
it's such
reform.
an easy thing for them to win over young voters. It is quite curious and strange why they are not doing it.
Well, from housing to foreign policy now, because Labour has claimed that the Prime Minister's diplomatic approach to the Ukraine crisis is in disarray, as the Partygate report diverted Boris's attention allegedly away from Russia to parties at Downing Street.
Yes, indeed. Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy said, amid a dangerous crisis threatening peace in Europe, a vital diplomatic opportunity has been missed as Boris Johnson scrambled to hold on to his job. But what would this approach be? Well, we're joined now to talk about this and yesterday's resignation of senior Tory aides by Sam Ashworth-Hayes, Director of Studies at the Henry Jackson Society. I mean, do you agree with David Lammy's assessment that we are effectively missing a huge opportunity here?
Well, the UK has been one of Ukraine's most active supporters, obviously, in training troops and developing capacity before the current crisis, and now sending money and anti-armor weapons now. But obviously, we have missed an opportunity for Boris Johnson to hold discussions with his Russian counterparts recently, as he was busy giving responses to the House. He hasn't missed his opportunity to talk to Zelensky, though. So some opportunities have gone wanting, but we are still basically at the forefront of being supporters.
The Labour Party itself making this sort of criticism is interesting, because I'm struggling to sort of understand what the Labour Party policy would be towards Ukraine. We've seen that, for example, France and Germany and a lot of continental Europe has been weaker on Russia. America and the UK have been stronger. Where does the Labour Party sit in the spectrum of policy?
Well, this is a really interesting topic, because they've obviously sent Lammy and Healy over to Kiev to talk about this issue, and Starmer has put a piece in the Telegraph sort of looking at what Britain might do, and he's kind of come down on this side of domestic sanctions and sorting out Russian money in London, as he puts it, which is interesting, and it's not a bad policy. But you have raised an interesting point, which is that the Labour Party foreign policy perspectives for the government that may well sort of be relatively soon coming is actually quite unclear. They don't really have a similar document to the government's integrated review setting out this foreign policy vision that you can kind of use to predict what they're going to do on a given issue. And Starmer's own tendencies are to comment on the legality or illegality of issues, but not to say quite so much about what we might do. So it's you raise a really interesting point in that actually there's a real sort of sense of uncertainty about what Labour foreign policy on any issue is going to be.
Which is interesting, because obviously under the previous Labour Party leader, their policy was very clear, pretty disagreeable to many people, but very clear nonetheless. Some might say a little bit too appeasing of dictators and demagogues and fascistic regimes around the world. But the Labour Party now doesn't seem to be saying all that much. Is it your sense that they've moved to be more interventionist, or just don't really care about foreign policy at all?
Well, I'd say it's something closer to the latter, in that what you get from the Labour Party on foreign policy at the moment seems to be quite reactionary. Like an issue comes into the news, they're addressed as they see fit according to their sort of core set of principles, but they don't sort of go out and set like an active vision for what this policy should be. And this is something we're hoping to have some research out in the near future, actually sort of just looking at what a Labour foreign policy might look like, because obviously there's a very real possibility for a Labour government now, and each regulation brings that possibility slightly nearer.
And just quickly bringing it back to some issues domestically, I mean, what do you make of some of the recent resignations by many Number 10 As, quite significantly Munira Mirzat, head of Number 10 policy? I mean, what do you think this says about Boris Johnson's current situation?
I suggested probably lacks some confidence in his ability to see this one through.
Well, Sam Ashworth-Hayes, thank you very much for joining us to go through those issues there. Really, really interesting. I think it's important that we scrutinise not just the government, but also the people who want to cast themselves as being a government in waiting.
Yes, I think that is very true. Well, after the break, we're joined by the Freedom Convoy trucker who will be telling us about the reasons for protesting the Canada vaccine mandate. That's right after the weather.
Good morning. It's colder out there today, cold enough for some snow and ice in places as well. A cold front has moved across the country through the night, bringing a spell of heavy rain and gusty winds, and it is sweeping away the mild air that's been in place for the past few days, introducing much colder air with a cold feel to it because of the wind, particularly across Scotland. It's not completely cleared away yet. The rain is still across the southeast and East Anglia. A bit of snow in places as well before that scoots away by lunchtime. Sunnier skies follow, but so do the showers. Icy this morning across Northern Ireland and Western Scotland, where we've got plenty of showers that keep going through the day. Snow on the hills, but even to low levels. Sleet and snow likely at times across Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, Northwest England, maybe North Wales. A few wintry showers possible further south. Temperatures struggling, single figures below average. Add on that wind, it feels much closer to freezing. The showers will keep going across the northwest of England, Western Scotland through the evening. So again, it could turn icy as temperatures tumble, but then temperatures starting to rise in the north through the night as more cloud and rain moves in. That could bring some snow to parts of Scotland again on Saturday morning. It will be a cold night again with a touch of frost even in towns and cities, certainly in rural areas across the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast to start the weekend. But we should start here with some sunny spells. Generally quite a grey day though on Saturday, a damp day for Scotland. As I said, some snow for a time. Damp and drizzly too for Northern Ireland, Northwest England and much of Wales by the afternoon. Not much rain getting to the south or the east of England. It will be milder, temperatures back up to double figures in places, but it's still going to be windy, and the colder air will return to northern Scotland and spread more widely across the north on Sunday. So Sunday sees some damp weather across the south, wintry showers across the north, and again, for all of us, it's going to be pretty blustery.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 10:23 and this is To The Point on GB News with me, Anaya Eamonn and Tom Harwood. We're live on your TV and on your radio this morning.
Well, as we heard before the break, it seems to be only bad news for Boris Johnson today. 4 of the Prime Minister's senior advisers at Downing Street have quit, and 1 further, more junior member today.
Yes, number 10 Chief of Staff Dan Rosenfield, the Prime Minister's Principal Private Secretary Martin Reynolds, close aide Munira Mirza and Downing Street Director of Communications Jack Doyle all resigned last night.
And this morning, a 5th joined them. Eleanor Narazansky, the Special Advisor to the Prime Minister on Women and Equalities, working within Munira Mirza's team.
Yes, well, let's find out more about the mood in the country from Joe Tiemann, co-founder and director of Deltapol. Thank you for joining me this morning, Joe. I mean, do you really think that this is now impacting Boris Johnson significantly in the polls?
When you say this, it depends what you mean by this. We have seen significant events over the last few weeks and indeed months that have had a major impact both on Boris Johnson's personal ratings and indeed on the ratings of the Conservative Party generally. Whether this particular event, these resignations, actually brings about a further change, well, I think that's unlikely. Over the last few months, the major changes that we've seen have been as a result of, firstly, the release of the Allegra Stratton video. That caused Labour to move ahead to around about 4 or 5 points in the lead. And then more recently, the revelations around parties ahead of Prince Philip's funeral. That caused a further boost for Labour and taking them to around about double figures in terms of lead. Now, I don't think this latest announcement is going to have anything like that kind of impact. But the cumulative effect that it has, adding to all of these stories that have gone before, simply serves to maintain the situation that the government is in. And, of course, it prevents it from moving the news agenda on. I do, however, think that the more important result from yesterday is the impact, potentially, of the energy crisis and the cost of living. I think that is likely to have a longer-term impact that's far greater than the resignations.
Interesting. How much will people blame the cost of living crisis on this government? Of course, inflation in the United States is 7% higher than it is here. Of course, many countries in Europe are suffering more through the gas price hike than we are. To what extent will the United Kingdom be blamed? And one further addendum to that, the polls ticked up a little bit for the Tories last week. Is there any indication they're ticking back down again?
What we saw was a small contraction of the Labour lead last week in some of the polls. But I think what that's to do is, and without getting too technical about these things, it's to do with the way that the different polling agencies deal with people who say they won't vote. I think what we're seeing is that people are convinced in some cases that perhaps Boris Johnson may survive and the Conservatives are the people they'll go back to, but they're not quite convinced they'd actually turn out to vote for them yet. And so there's still hurdles to overcome. In terms of who could be blamed for the current situation, well, in the polls, people do blame the energy companies themselves. They also blame the world situation, but the government is also seen to be to blame for that as well. And whether the action that the government takes to deal with this, in terms of the kind of response that we saw yesterday, necessarily resonates remains to be seen. I don't think that's probably going to have a significant help for them. And so inflation, the cost of living, energy prices, it's all going to form a difficult spring for the government.
Wow, very, very uncertain times. We'll be following those polls very closely. Joe Twyman, founder and director of Deltapol, thank you very much for joining us this morning to go through that situation.
Well, in other news, the so-called Freedom Convoy of Canadian truckers opposed to a vaccine mandate has been called an insult to the truth for their hateful rhetoric by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who refuses to meet with them.
Well, protesters have been demonstrating in person outside the Canadian Parliament in Ottawa for days over a cross-border vaccine mandate for truck drivers.
Meanwhile, the truck convoy has been driving through the country for the past week, stretches over 45 miles and has raised over £5 million in donations before the GoFundMe page was suspended.
Well, joining us now is Gord McGill, a 25-year-old veteran trucker who recently took part in the Freedom Convoy protests in Ottawa.
Well, please let us know an update. Oh, sorry, go for it.
Pardon me, yeah. So Yeah, it's been a very interesting week for the Freedom Convoy. We've been racking up quite a few wins, as a matter of fact. The presence of the convoy has caused a ripple effect throughout Canadian politics. We've seen the leader of Her Majesty's lay back and take it opposition, the Conservative Party of Canada, has been ousted and an interim leader installed. The Premier of Saskatchewan has announced that all mandates and requirements in his province will end at the end of this month, and the Premier of Alberta is looking to follow suit. It's been very effective.
It's interesting to think why Justin Trudeau thought that this mandate would work, in a sense. When we've seen vaccine mandates before, it's to drive up the number of people who are getting their jab. But of course, a lot of truckers, such as yourself, I imagine, are Americans who are driving goods into Canada. And if Canada, in effect, shuts its borders to a high proportion of those drivers, of course, America is a less vaccinated country than many others around the world. Surely that's a bit shooting himself in the foot, particularly when it comes to goods on shelves.
It is. The north and south traffic over the Canadian border is handled mostly by Canadian trucks. There's a smaller percentage of Americans, but yeah, that's correct. And if American drivers don't want to come into Canada, well, their market's much bigger. They just won't. So, we've got pretty good vaccination rates on the Canadian side and in the trucking community. And all the truckers have been working through this pandemic and have been shown all this love as essential workers for the last 2 years. For Trudeau to come in and bring this in at such a late hour, it didn't make sense to anybody. It was viewed as by myself and many of my fellow road warriors as nothing more than punishment for failure to comply. It has very little to do with science, statistics, or the COVID rates on the ground. It's it wasn't taken very well, as you can see.
And also, Gord, you've raised over $5 million in donations, the truckers as a whole, but the GoFundMe page has also been suspended. I mean, what do you make of some of the reaction to what the truckers have been doing?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up. So yes, the GoFundMe has raised $10 million in Canadian funds. And very interestingly, Prime Minister Trudeau ran away, assuming that the protests, which I was at on Saturday in Ottawa, would turn into a January 6th North. And he has yet to meet with any of the leadership of the Freedom Convoy. However, a committee has been formed in Parliament to haul representatives from GoFundMe in front of Parliament to explain how they're not going to give any of that money to supposed extremists, which we've been accused of associating with. It's very interesting how they can bring GoFundMe to Parliament and talk to them, but not bring the truckers to Parliament and address our concerns.
Gord, you would disassociate yourself from those comments. A January 6th in the north, that's a pretty incendiary remark. Do you think most truckers would disassociate themselves from that?
Well, nobody ever associated with themselves to begin with. It was memed into reality. The government and its supporters in the media were shaking in their boots, thinking they were going to see a repeat of what happened in America, and nothing of the sort took place.
Well, thank you, Gord McGill, 25-year veteran trucker who recently took part in the Freedom Convoy protest in Ottawa, Canada.
Yeah, really good to get your perspective there. Thanks for joining us and for getting up early on the other side of the pond. Well, after the break, the First Minister of Northern Ireland resigned yesterday in opposition to the Northern Ireland Protocol. So what happens next? That's after a look at this morning's news.
It's 10:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson has reportedly been hit by the resignation of a fifth advisor just hours after 4 senior aides quit last night. Conservative Home Editor Paul Goodman claims that Eleanor Narazanski has left her role as a special advisor in the policy unit. Yesterday, Boris Johnson lost his Chief of Staff, Principal Private Secretary, Director of Communications and Policy Chief. The Conservatives have won the Southend West by-election, prompted by the killing of Sir David Amess. The other major parties, Labour, the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, chose not to stand. That paved the way for Tory candidate Anna Firth to gain 86% of the vote. The Foreign Secretary is condemning reports that Russia's planning to fabricate an attack by Ukraine, giving President Vladimir Putin an excuse to invade. US reports claim Moscow planned to use a fake video of a Ukrainian military attack on Russian speakers. Stormont has lost its governing powers after DUP First Minister Paul Givan stepped down over the post-Brexit agreement. He claims the Northern Ireland Protocol is destabilising peace between the power-sharing institutions. 95% of teachers say they've seen a rise in anxiety in their students since the start of the school year. In a poll by health charity Place to Be, many also reported higher levels of depression among school children. And less than an hour to go before the opening ceremony for the Winter Olympics at the Bird's Nest Stadium in Beijing. Due to COVID-19, the Games will be taking place inside a so-called closed loop, with competitors kept away from the public and only small audiences attending. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. We're back at the top of the hour with a full update. Next, it's back to Anaya and Tom with To The Point after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good morning to you. It's 10:37 and this is To The Point with Anaya, Lauren, Iman and me, Tom Harwood. We're live on your TV and radio this morning.
Well, interestingly, Nicola Sturgeon's SNP will spend £300,000 soaring the bottom of school doors in 2,000 classrooms with problematic ventilation to increase airflow and reduce the spread of coronavirus.
Yeah, the proposal is part of the Scottish Government's £4.3 million package to tackle persistently high CO2 levels in certain rooms.
Well, critics have said the government should be more focused on improving education. 1/3 of Scottish schools saw a fall in reading, writing and counting skills since the pandemic, with a staggering 1/3 of primary 4 to 7-year-old students now below the academic standard.
Well, Dr Sandesh Gulhane is the Shadow Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care for the Scottish Conservatives, and I'm delighted to say he can join us now. So, first of all, I'm sure we can all appreciate how ventilation is useful for this virus, how fresh air helps eradicate the virus. But I can think of one or two unintended consequences of soaring off the bottom of doors in classrooms, not least the permanent effect it might have on these schools. What on earth is the SNP thinking?
Honestly, we don't know. It's the most ridiculous scenario where there's £300,000 and Nicola Sturgeon said that we need to look at how the doors are hanging, which is a very posh way of saying get Bob the Builder in to saw off the bottom of the door. What an absolutely ridiculous way of going about helping our children in classrooms. Now, these are children still who have face masks on during class time, which is impacting their learning. And, you know, we've just seen that significant increase on your programme with the number of children with anxiety. This isn't helping them. What we need to do is get HEPA filters in. We need to get airflow going through classrooms, not sawing the bottom off the door.
And also in the introduction, we mentioned that 1/3 of Scottish schools saw a fall in reading, writing and counting skills. It doesn't really seem like this particular measure that she's putting forward is a main priority for education when other things are a problem, clearly.
You're absolutely right. Nicola Sturgeon said, judge me on education. So let's do that. We're seeing falling standards in the PISA scores. We're seeing the drop happening here. Education is vital to not only our future, our children's futures, but the way that we want to really go, the direction we want to go as a country. And having falling standards under the SNP watch is simply unacceptable. We need to ensure that children get the best possible form of education. Remember, it wasn't that long ago that Scotland was the envy of the world when it came to education, and it simply isn't the case at the moment. And that's all down to Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP policies.
So sad, particularly the Scottish universities that used to be the light of the world seem to have declined somewhat. But just for those listening and watching today who are not sure with the latest regulations in Scotland, it can be very confusing having all of these different regulations across our United Kingdom. Is it currently the case that you don't have to wear a mask in a pub, but you do have to wear a mask in a school?
That's pretty much exactly it. Now, the problem that we have in Scotland are the rules are confusing and there are too many of them. And Nicola Sturgeon is very quick to restrict and very slow to release. And that's what we're going to be seeing with the SNP power grab when they're trying to get these powers made permanent, which is really worrying for democracy. But Tom, just as you said, if you go to a pub in Scotland, you can take your face mask off and you can enjoy a drink and then when you go to the toilet, you put the face mask back on. But if you're in school and you're sitting trying to learn, especially if you have trouble for whatever reason, you've got some hearing difficulties, that is going to significantly impact the way you learn. It's going to significantly impact how well you do. And also having a face mask on for that length of time does create people having a bit of anxiety, especially our children. And that's a concern. So what we really want to see is children being able to learn in an environment when they're sat down in class with their face masks off, with the teacher being able to talk without a face mask. Obviously, when they're walking through a school, we're saying that's absolutely fine to put the face mask back on at that stage. And when they're out in the playground, take it off again. But it would seem to a normal, sensible person that it's okay to take your face mask off when you're learning, if it's okay for you to take your face mask off in a pub.
Yeah. And finally, Dr. Gulhain, I mean, if the Scottish Conservatives were in power, what would they be doing differently? Would you follow the route that England has gone on and effectively remove all COVID restrictions at this point?
Well, what we need to do, if we were in power, we wouldn't be in this ridiculous scenario in the first place. What we needed to do was ensure that we have a proper workforce plan with a proper workforce strategy. We would have kept open the mass vaccination centres to have increased the amount of vaccinations that we have got. At this stage, what we would be looking to do is put HEPA filters into schools. We would be looking to get the NHS back to working where it should be. We are so far behind. We are going to be seeing a huge backlog and huge delays in Scotland. A friend of mine is an orthopaedic surgeon. He's telling me that he's not operating. He doesn't have any waiting list for patients coming to see him in clinic, but he doesn't get to operate. That needs to change. We need to get people back being healthy and getting through things now. So what we would do if we were in power is to get the NHS going again. We would remove restrictions as quickly as we could with the flexibility of being able to put them back if something were to happen. It's looking like the Omicron variant is good for us. It's receding. And that means that we should be removing restrictions to give people their freedoms back. And that's what it comes down to, trusting the Scottish people, trusting them to do the right thing, which the Scottish Conservatives do.
Well, Dr. Sanjesh Gulhane, thank you very much for joining us this morning on To The Point on GB News. Really, really interesting to get your perspective there, and very important that we cover these stories.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Paul Givan has resigned as First Minister of Northern Ireland over post-Brexit trade rules. It comes after one of his ministers tried to block the inspection of goods arriving from other ports of the UK. Sinn Féin have called for new elections for the Northern Ireland Assembly.
Well, with us now is Kevin Marr, the former advisor to the most recent Labour Northern Ireland Secretary, Sean Woodward, now a writer and commentator on Irish politics. Welcome to the programme. I suppose, first of all,
morning.
I want to get a bit of clarity here. There's been the resignation of the First Minister, but not necessarily the collapse of the executive. And this is all to do with a bit of legislation that's going through the UK Parliament right now that might well receive royal assent next week and could have a retrospective effect in terms of keeping that executive afloat despite the resignation of the First Ministers.
Yeah, it's a bit confusing, isn't it? Under the traditional rules, when a First Minister or a Deputy First Minister, the roles are the symbiotic. You've got to have a First Minister and Deputy First Minister, and this is instituted in the Northern Ireland setup from the Good Friday Agreement because of the long, inglorious tradition of unionist majority rule at Stormont. So the idea is that you lock everybody together, zip everybody together, and one side can't govern if the other side isn't prepared to govern with them. So that's what has happened yesterday. Paul Givan, the DUP's First Minister for the last 8 months, not exactly a household name, but nevertheless, he's gone. So that means Michelle O'Neill, the Sinn Féin Deputy First Minister, has got to go too. But it doesn't actually mean that the rest of the executive has to go yet. They can kind of trundle on, but they can't make any significant decisions because everything routes through the office of the First and Deputy First Minister. So we're in a kind of zombie executive at the moment, and that's not really something that any of the other parties. There's five member executives, so the SDLP are in there, the Unionists are in there, and the Alliance parties in there as well. But they are pretty much all coming out this morning and saying, let's cut to the chase and have early elections, and let's not wait until the 5th of May. Let's actually get this out of the way now. And to be honest, even the DUP are saying that this morning.
And from a political point of view, if we were to have early elections, I'm not quite sure the constitutional standpoint for that. I'm assuming there'd need to be UK Parliament legislation for that. But if there were, would this situation, the resignation, the high-profile DUP opposition to the effects of the protocol and these checks on the border specifically, might they be able to climb back up in the polls? Because they haven't been polling that well recently.
No, you're right. There's been a series of opinion polls that has, to put it candidly, has just freaked the DUP out. The DUP has assiduously become the main player in unionist politics over the last 20 years. They've stripped away at the Ulster Unionists, David Trimble's party, who were cock of the walks for a very long time in unionism. The DUP, Ian Paisley's, obviously Ian Paisley was leader for 28 years. Last year, when an opinion poll came out that showed them actually slipping behind Sinn Féin, which is significant because that would mean that there would be a role reversal, that you would end up with a Sinn Féin First Minister and a DUP, potentially DUP Deputy First Minister, which they really don't want to see. But what the problem they've got is they're betwixt and between two other unionist parties. There's the traditional unionist voice, which is a kind of neo-Paisleyite party led by a chap called Jim Allister. Very, very kind of unreconstructed, right-wing unionist party as you would expect. And there are the Ulster Unionists under a new leader, Doug Beattie, which are moving in a kind of more liberal direction. Certainly the rhetoric is much more liberal. So the DUP is betwixt and between losing support to a more liberal unionist party and a more hardline unionist party. And its position on the protocol means that the TUV has made exceptional progress in the last year or so and really eaten into the DUP support. So what you've potentially got is three unionist parties polling at pretty much the same level. So the DUP needs to, what the DUP is deciding to do is to move right, try and compete with the TUV, pull back some of that support in the hope that it can catch Sinn Féin and remain the top party. It's a very big ask because the latest opinion poll 2 weeks ago had them 8 points behind Sinn Féin. Now, Sinn Féin support is pretty much where it was. It's just that the DUP's support has dropped away enormously, and that's the challenge. So what we're seeing with this last week with the executive, with Edwin Poots demanding that there's a halt to border checks, and with Paul Given's resignation yesterday, is some basic party politics playing out. The DUP is in existential crisis and is doing whatever it can to claw back that position and to hold on.
So if we can't really put a cigarette paper between the TUV, and the TUV used to be a bit of a joke party, no one really took them seriously.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Suddenly they've risen up in the polls. It's almost like a sort of UKIP effect if the DUP were the parallel of the Conservatives. Well, I suppose the DUP were the UKIP effect to the UUP in the first place. A bit of their own medicine.
That's a perfect analogy, actually. So that is exactly what's happened. You've had a party with I wouldn't call Jim Allister exactly charismatic. He's certainly not in the Nigel Farage category, but he's somebody that is persistent and is well recognised and well understood in terms of the clarity of his position. I mean, Jim Allister, and I'm sure would concede this point that lots of people don't like him and his politics, but enough people do, and that in the game in a multi-party system actually is all you need. You just need to have a very strong sliver of support. So what the TUV have done is just expand, and particularly people in the loyalist community that don't like the protocol and don't feel that the DUP has given the right leadership. Many feel that the DUP have frankly been hoodwinked by Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson, of course, went to the DUP's conference in 2018, emphatically, clearly said there will be no border in the Irish Sea, and then, of course, goes and negotiates exactly that. So the DUP are kind of left there with egg on their face, basically. And a lot of people have said, look, it's time for a change. You're not giving the leadership that we need. And the position within unionism and loyalism is very, very fluid. But it's worth pointing out that the Ulster Unionist parties had a resurgence as well. So there are obviously people that are not dying on a hill in opposition to the protocol from within the unionist community, and they're looking to the UUP. So it's a perfect storm, really, of electoral calamity that the DUP faces. So this week is all about politics. It's all about political survival.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning, Kevin Marr, former advisor to the most recent Labour Northern Ireland Secretary Sean Woodward. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, really interesting chat there. Something that I think we don't talk about enough, the political dynamics in Northern Ireland that are really fascinating, but not widely covered. Now, President Joe Biden confirmed that the leader of ISIS has died. This would ordinarily be a story that would top the bulletins, but after the political week we've had, it's now rather further down the running order.
Yes, Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qureshi died by suicide bomb, taking his family members and children with him during a raid by US commandos on a house northwest Syria yesterday. With us now is extremism, radicalisation and terrorism expert Wazeek. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I mean, what do you make of the developments with ISIS?
Well, I think it is a significant development, but it is also a symbolic one. Leadership decapitation, which has taken out the leader of terrorist organizations, doesn't actually have the intended impact that one would expect. If anything, it is more symbolic than strategic, and I think what Joe Biden has done may have an impact, but not the intended impact. And this is something that he's going to need to consider in moving forward in terms of his fight on counterterrorism.
You say that the decapitation strategy doesn't always work, but certainly with Al-Qaeda taking out Osama bin Laden certainly did seem to help, did it not? Sort of taking out the charismatic leader that everyone was behind. Suddenly the organisation fractures. Is there not a chance of that happening here?
That's not necessarily the case in terms of Al-Qaeda. When Osama bin Laden was taken out, yes, Al-Qaeda did need to regroup, but in terms of being a hierarchical organization, they ended up decentralizing, and they expanded their activities elsewhere. So outsourcing their activities to other actors and to other, in terms of their strategy. So yes, charismatic leaders are needed to start up the terrorist organizations, but they're not necessarily needed for the survival of them.
As Tom said in the introduction, ordinarily a story like this would be very high on the radar for news. And is this perhaps, even though there's been many other stories in the news round recently, is this perhaps an indication that terrorism, radicalisation and what's going on in the Middle East isn't necessarily at the top of the radar as it otherwise would have been previously for the UK government?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be, and this is a serious concern because we need to remember that people from Britain leave the country and travel to Syria to obviously join the Islamic State. However, some of them have tried to come back, some of them are still trying to come back. And we also have homegrown terrorists. And if we allow ourselves to be consumed by news that is not necessarily at the level that this is, we could be making a strategic error in terms of dealing with extremism and radicalisation, because that is our biggest threat at the moment.
Well, thank you, Wazeek, expert in radicalisation, extremism and terrorism, giving his thoughts about the recent development by one of an ISIS figure being killed by suicide bomb.
And what do you think about this as well? Please do email in gbviews@gbnews.uk. Should we be talking about these terrorism stories higher up the agenda? Because, of course, I can't help but think that over the last, few months, we've had an MP killed, we've had a bomb explode outside of a Liverpool hospital, we've exported a terrorist to Texas who attacked a synagogue. I mean, it seems like we've had quite a lot of terrorism in the last few months alone in this country, and yet we're talking about wallpaper and cheese and wine more than something that could affect life and death.
Yes, absolutely, and I think many people will echo that sentiment. It is very worrying. I mean, it is a huge, multifaceted terror threat, and it has been one that has seemingly not gone away despite efforts over the last 2 decades. And we do not want to live in a society where terrorism becomes a permanent fixture of our societal life, and therefore, why isn't it being something that is driven much higher up the political agenda? Keep your thoughts coming with that.
Absolutely. We want to hear what you have to say about terrorism. We also want to hear what you have to say about the situation in Northern Ireland. What should happen to the protocol? And, of course, something that we mentioned very briefly at the start of this programme, housing and families. Should we be having more children? There are people like Harry and Meghan who don't want to have any children at all, any more children at all. They want to limit their number, a sort of child policy like the Chinese Communist Party. I think we should have nice big families.
I agree. I think we need to be removing the stigma of having lots of children. I think it's a great thing for society.
Absolutely.
Yes, keep your views coming. gbviews@gbnews with the weather now.
Hello again. It is an awful lot colder out there today. A stiff, fresh wind bringing a mixture of sunshine and showers. And those showers are wintry, particularly over western Scotland, where snow showers will continue through the day. This cold front has swept across the country overnight, clearing from East Anglia and the southeast by around about lunchtime. Introduced the colder air, and it's still windy out there as well, and that wind bringing a lot of showers into Northern Ireland, western Scotland. Snow here down to low levels at times, building up over some of the higher routes, particularly in western Scotland. For Northern England, a mixture of hail, sleet and snow in the showers here, along with North Wales. But further south and east, not too many showers, many places dry and bright with some winter sunshine, but it is cold. Certainly a lot colder than recent days. Add on that wind, that gusty, gusty wind, and it feels even colder. And that wind will continue to bring more snow showers over western Scotland this evening. The potential for some disruption, especially on some of the higher routes as the snow could start to build up. But elsewhere, the wintry showers do tend to ease this evening. For many, it'll be dry across the south and east, certainly dry as we head into the weekend. But it will be cold with temperatures close to freezing, even in towns and cities. Some sunshine then early on across the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast, but cloud and rain will move back in across the north with some further snow across Scotland, intending to rain at lower levels through the day. And we'll see that rain on and off for Northern Ireland, Northern England, Wales throughout the afternoon. Further south and east, most places dry, turning milder again, but not feeling all that mild with the strong wind. And the cold weather returns to northern Scotland through Saturday afternoon. And again here on Saturday night, snow showers could cause some further disruption on the higher routes especially. We'll keep the cloud and rain across much of northern England and Wales as we head into Sunday morning. Sunday, again, staying pretty mixed, staying windy with wintry showers across the north, a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain in the south.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good morning to you. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, and Inaya Folarin-Iman on your TV and on your radio. We're here all the way through to midday with a show absolutely stuffed full of today's big stories and lots of discussion on the issues of the day. Rising energy bills, Downing Street resignations, and the controversial Beijing Winter Olympics.
Absolutely. Make sure that you get in touch with your views as usual. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be getting through all of those throughout the show. But first, here's the latest news.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson has reportedly been hit by the resignation of a fifth advisor just hours after 4 senior aides quit. Conservative Home Editor Paul Goodman claims that Eleanor Narizanski has left her role as a special advisor in the policy unit. Yesterday, Boris Johnson lost his Chief of Staff, Principal Private Secretary, Director of Communications and Policy Chief. The Conservatives have won the Southend West by-election, prompted by the killing of Sir David Amess. The 69-year-old was fatally stabbed during a constituency surgery in Leigh-on-Sea in October last year. He'd represented the seat since 1997. The contest saw a low turnout of 24%. The other major parties, Labour, the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, chose not to stand. That paved the way for Tory candidate Anna Firth to gain 86% of the vote. The government's been told to focus on getting the UK off the gas grid and to invest in energy efficiency to reduce bills. That's the message from E.ON's UK boss. It follows regulator Ofgem's announcement yesterday that energy prices will soar by 54% from April. The hike will affect 22 million households and add up to £693 to annual bills. Electrical engineer Lynette Marsden told GB News hers will go up by at least 153%. Now her provider's gone bust. She thinks all the competition's been taken out of the marketplace.
Yesterday, you were reporting of Shell making £12 billion profit in the last quarter of last year. Scottish Power, I know, were fined £18 million in 2016 for poor customer service. It's just disgusting that these companies are allowed to charge users extraordinate amount for the energy and make huge profits, get fined for performing poorly. And I'm calling, and I've emailed the Energy Secretary about this, that the whole system needs reform, and I want an investigation into it.
Stormont has lost its governing powers after the DUP First Minister stepped down over the post-Brexit agreement. Paul Given claims the Northern Ireland Protocol's destabilising peace. Under power-sharing rules, his resignation automatically removed Sinn Féin Deputy First Minister Michelle O'Neill from her position. Former First Minister and GB News presenter Arlene Foster says the protocol's been challenging for people in Northern Ireland.
Protocol, of course, doesn't deliver on Brexit for Northern Ireland. I've called it the Hotel California. You can check out, but you never leave. And that's how we feel in Northern Ireland, whilst the rest of the United Kingdom has left. We're actually still in single market regulations and rules, but have absolutely no say in those rules.
The Foreign Secretary is condemning reports that Russia is planning to fabricate an attack by Ukraine, giving President Vladimir Putin an excuse to invade. US reports claim Moscow planned to use a fake video of a Ukrainian military attack on Russian speakers. The video would have included actors and elaborate props. Liz Truss says it's clear and shocking evidence of Russia's unprovoked aggression. The first patients have undergone a pioneering robotic surgery to treat throat cancer. Dubbed transoral robotic surgery, or TORS, a surgeon uses a high-tech computer system to guide surgical tools and examine cancerous tissues. The breakthrough at Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow means some patients will be able to avoid radiotherapy altogether. Prince Harry has admitted experiencing burnout. In an interview for a mental health company, the Duke of Sussex said he's felt like he was getting to the very end of everything he had. The Duke also stressed the importance of self-care, but admitted it can be difficult to find the time.
Any fuel or any steam in the engine just was like, I was burning the candle at both ends, and it's like, boom. That is when you are forced to look inside yourself, because with everything else around you, seemingly you feel as though it's working against you. The only way that you can really combat it, and the only way you can build resilience for the outside world and your entire environment, is the inner work.
8 new stamps have been released by the Royal Mail to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee on Sunday. The set features photographs throughout the decades illustrating her dedication to service and her changing fashion over the years. The Queen's just 2 days away from becoming the first British sovereign in history to reach 70 years on the throne. And the opening ceremony for the Winter Olympics begins in less than half an hour's time at the Bird's Nest Stadium in Beijing. The Games will be taking place inside a so-called closed loop due to COVID-19. Competitors will be kept away from the public and only small selected audiences will be allowed to attend. The UK is not sending any diplomats to the Games as part of a boycott due to alleged human rights abuses in China, which Beijing strongly denies. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as and when it happens. Now let's return to Naya and Tom with To The Point.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, and Inaya Falarin Iman on your TV and on your radio. We've got a show stuffed full of all today's big stories and lots of discussion about the issues you care about. So here's what's on the menu today.
Indeed, while Britain suffers so-called Black Thursday after energy bills increased by £700 and soaring interest rates, you see the biggest fall in living standards ever. Let us know how this is affecting you by getting in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
And we'll find out what last night's Downing Street resignations mean for Boris Johnson's future.
Yes, and the US has claimed Russia is planning to stage a fake Ukrainian attack that it would use as a pretext for invasion. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss condemned Russia over the alleged plot.
We have all of that coming up and so much more across the programme. And of course, you can get in touch with your views as usual on gbviews@gbnews.uk. We have been looking at some of them already, and I've got to say, quite a few are coming in about the size of families.
Well, so many families are genuinely scared to turn on their heatings, as Ofgem announced yesterday that they will raise the energy price cap by nearly £700 in April. Our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis was out in Nottinghamshire to see how some people plan to enjoy the increase.
Every day, Sandra delivers emergency food parcels across Sutton in Ashfield, where rising costs are driving more people into poverty.
We're seeing when people come to the door with multi-layers of clothing, they can be wearing thick coats, I've seen one wearing gloves, and they're quite anxious about how the situation is going to escalate when the fuel prices go up.
On streets like this, cold homes aren't uncommon. Some choose between heating and eating.
Are you able to put your heating on at the minute?
Lisa is on disability benefits. The mum of 2 has fibromyalgia, a painful condition that means she can't work. She's seen her energy bill spike, affecting everyday decisions.
My young lad, he always says, Mum, can my friend come round to play on the Xbox? And I tend to have to check the electric and say, oh, no, I've only got £5 left. That's got to last us till tomorrow, so your friend can't come round. Or in regards to the heating, if it's absolutely freezing and we've only got a few quid left on the gas, it's a case of just pulling the froze over you and chilling out with the froze, or dressing gown. I tend to live in my dressing gown so I don't get cold.
Yesterday, the energy regulator Ofgem announced a price cap rise of 54%, nearly £2,000 for the average person. Spiralling fuel costs globally are to blame. Chancellor Rishi Sunak has announced measures to try to manage the damage, a £200 energy discount plus a tax rebate for many.
We're going to give people a £150 council tax rebate to help with the cost of energy in April, and this discount won't need to be repaid.
Critics say the support does too little too late. Here in Ashfield, 1 in 3 families are living on universal credit, and so any change in the cost of their living can be quite difficult. And so a lot of people are having to make really tricky decisions about how they spend their money. Back at the food bank, Sandra has another parcel to prepare. The local college set up the service when the pandemic began. Tutors know who it is that needs help. Sometimes they face the same problems themselves.
Electricity plays a big part. I mean, what child doesn't love to sit and watch telly and, I don't know, have all the lights on every time he goes around the house? So it's quite worrying that you've got to be watching those little things that the children do all the time. But you have to be mindful of how much it's going to be costing at the minute.
Winter may soon end, but the cost of living crisis has barely begun. Will Hollis for GB News in the East Midlands.
Well, thank you, Will Hollis, for that report. Not very happy news for many people, but very, very real.
Not at all. Well, here to talk more about how the cost of living will affect working people, as well as the latest from Downing Street, is Christine Jardine, Liberal Democrat MP for Edinburgh West. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Christine. I mean, this is really now a squeeze, a major squeeze on ordinary people. I mean, what do you make of it all?
Oh, I think it's disastrous. Most families are now going to have to wait 6 months for any help. There's nothing to help them in April. It comes in October, and even then, it's only half of the amount, and it's spreading the pain. £200 over 5 years. I mean, it's just ridiculous. What Rishi Sunak is doing is gambling with the taxpayers' money, gambling with our money that the price of energy will come down, that gas prices will come down, and it'll all be fine. Well, we don't know that. We put forward a package of measures which would have taken about £1,000 a year off the cost of living for families, would have made them, more able to cope with this, and a tax on those giant companies that have made super profits in this, a one-off to try and alleviate the burden on ordinary families who are now going to have to make the decision: do they pay for their heating or do they pay for food? And that is scary, and he's gambling, and it's not good enough.
And Christine, do you support the rise in national insurance that Boris Johnson and this government are proposing and will be implementing?
No. Not at all. What you're seeing at the moment is families facing a triple whammy of a national insurance rise, energy price rise, and now mortgage rise as well. And, even the sort of meagre, begrudging support announced by Rishi Sunak, there's still going to be more than £1,000 a year poorer. And, we did have a rescue package which we put forward, and one of the things was that we would scrap the national insurance hike and the stealth tax through freezing the threshold on tax payments. And I think what we have to recognise in this is that Rishi Sunak talks a lot about being fiscally wise and looking after the money, but it's all about the spreadsheets. Where in those spreadsheets are people and the impact it's having on people's lives? We need to have some empathy from the Chancellor, and we need to have some understanding of the impact this is having on ordinary people's lives. And he needs to start looking to big business who've made a profit in the pandemic and who are making a profit now to help us out of this. If we're really all in this together, then they need to be doing their bit. They need to be paying more tax. They need to be helping get ordinary families through this.
A little bit worried here that all of the parties in the House of Commons seem to be looking at this from a demand-side perspective. Your package of £1,000 per household, it's Labour's package of handing out money as well, and taxing and handing out money. All of the parties seem to be doing this. Is not the worry here that if we only focus on the demand side and hand out money to people, that could actually push prices further up? That in and of itself could be inflationary. Whereas if we looked on the supply side, about producing more of our own domestic energy, about driving down those costs, not through pumping up the money supply even more, would that not be a better solution here?
We do need to do that, and what we need to be doing is making sure that we're investing, and this government hasn't done that either. We are in this mess because this government has dithered and delayed about everything, that we don't have as much of a shift to a more sustainable economy than we should have. They used up Rishi Sunak stands up and says, there's been a big demand for gas last year. Well, this government ran down our storage of gas. So, they can't have it both ways. And what we think about...
Can I ask you here, on the specifics of that supply side, would the Liberal Democrat Party support expanding shale gas exploration in the UK instead of importing it from overseas, producing our own gas here?
No. What we need to
do... OK, so you wouldn't... Hang on, Christine. If you wouldn't support expanding gas power, would you support building more nuclear power stations, very clean energy, building more nuclear power stations across the UK, yes or no?
No, we've been absolutely clear.
Sorry, Christine Jardine, I'm really sorry, this is the final part of this question.
If you don't let me speak.
This is the final part of my question. This is the final part, I promise. You can have a long answer after this. If you're not going to produce more gas domestically, and you're opposed to new nuclear domestically, how on earth are we going to get this energy to drive down bills?
I did not say either of those things, Tom. Please don't put words in my mouth. What we are doing is prioritising in a crisis. And what we see is that there have been massive profits made by giant companies in all sectors in this pandemic and this crisis. And what we need is a one-off to help get us through this. Now, long term, we want to shift away from being dependent on imported gas. We need to do that. We need energy security in this country. Yes, we need to do that long term. But the way to do it is not shale. It's not coal. The way to do it, and the way to do it is to move forward and transition into clean economies. If the Conservative government hadn't cut the investments in carbon capture and they hadn't moved away from important projects like the ones in Peterhead, then we would be much further forward. But what we have right now is a priority that has to be getting people through this winter and using the resources we have to do that to the best of our ability. And that's where this government is getting it wrong.
You mentioned moving towards a more sustainable future energy-wise. Is there any country that you would think right now is doing it correctly? Because this is obviously a wider European problem, this energy crisis too. So is there any country that you could point to that you would say is doing a good job at this?
Well, France has imposed a windfall tax. There's an example that we could look at. Other countries, we don't need to look very far to see that there is another way of doing it, that there is a way of looking at the crisis and looking at how we get through it. But you know what? This government is now waited until we're engulfed by the crisis rather than doing what we asked them to do, which was to have a summit, to sit down with all the stakeholders, with different parties, and come up with a strategy. They don't seem to have a strategy for anything, this government. They seem to go from one quick sort of short-term solution, one patch, one sticking plaster, to the next. And what we need in this is a real long-term strategy First of all, to get us through this, to prioritise getting through this winter, bringing down inflation, dealing with the interest rates, but moving forward into a more sustainable economy. They have to get their finger out and do this. And they're so obsessed with the problems they have in Downing Street, and goodness knows how that's running at the moment. I mean, from my experience of working in there, if you lose all these top people at one time, you've got a big problem. You know, they are so obsessed with this, and they're mismanaging everything from the internal workings of Downing Street to the economy. And it really is time that instead of all these resignations at Downing Street, that Boris Johnson admitted that actually he's making a hash of it. It's time he left.
Well, Christine Jardine, we really appreciate your perspective here on To The Point this morning. Thank you for taking us through what the Lib Dems would do and your criticism of the Conservative Party as well. Thank you for your perspective this morning.
I just don't see how we can have a sustainable future without seriously looking at shale gas and nuclear. It has been fundamentally game-changing in America. It's
America have
becoming
less than one-third the energy costs that we do.
Yeah,
less
it
than
is
one-third.
quite remarkable. I think that we do need to really be looking at those sources of energy seriously again.
Well, after the break, the UN has been accused of colluding with China over the delayed publication of their human rights report. We'll speak to an expert on China. That's after the weather.
Hello again. It is an awful lot colder out there today. A stiff, fresh wind bringing a mixture of sunshine and showers. And those showers are wintry, particularly over western Scotland, where snow showers will continue through the day. This cold front has swept across the country overnight, clearing from East Anglia and the southeast by around about lunchtime. Introduced the colder air, and it's still windy out there as well, and that wind bringing a lot of showers into Northern Ireland, western Scotland. Snow here down to low levels at times, building up over some of the higher routes, particularly in western Scotland. For Northern England, a mixture of hail, sleet and snow in the showers here, along with North Wales. But further south and east, not too many showers, many places dry and bright with some winter sunshine, but it is cold. Certainly a lot colder than recent days. Add on that wind, that gusty, gusty wind, and it feels even colder. And that wind will continue to bring more snow showers over western Scotland this evening. The potential for some disruption, especially on some of the higher routes, as the snow could start to build up. But elsewhere, the wintry showers do tend to ease this evening. For many, it'll be dry across the south and east, certainly dry as we head into the weekend. But it will be cold with temperatures close to freezing, even in towns and cities. Some sunshine then early on across the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast, but cloud and rain will move back in across the north with some further snow across Scotland, intending to rain at low levels through the day. And we'll see that rain on and off for Northern Ireland, Northern England, Wales throughout the afternoon. Further south and east, most places dry, turning milder again, but not feeling all that mild with the strong wind. And the cold weather returns to northern Scotland through Saturday afternoon. And again here on Saturday night, snow showers could cause some further disruption on the higher routes especially. We'll keep the cloud and rain across much of northern England and Wales as we head into Sunday morning. Sunday, again, staying pretty mixed, staying windy with wintry showers across the north, a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain in the south.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis, and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that has been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here. Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Good morning, it's 11:24 and this is To The Point with Anaya Falarin, Iman and Tom Harwood on GB News. We're live on your TV and your radio this morning.
Yes, and many of you have been getting in touch over the last hour and a half about your views, and so we're going to dive into the inbox to find out what many of you have been thinking.
Absolutely. Can I kick off here with something that John has mentioned? We did this story about how the SNP plan to spend £300,000 cutting off the bottom of school doors to increase ventilation. Well, John mentions that most doors in schools are fire doors. Cutting these doors would put kids at a higher risk of death from fire than COVID.
Well, hopefully the SNP will be thinking that through significantly before they spend £300,000. Well, Sue Smith has said, I wholeheartedly agree it's time to move on from Downing Street parties to things that matter like terrorism and Ukraine. We are all angry at the sacrifices we have had to make when the government feel it doesn't apply to them. But what is new about that? Well, I think many people would echo those sentiments that there are significantly more things to be talking about, such as the cost of living crisis that we've been talking about on the show.
And we were mentioning that terrorism wasn't being talked about enough. Well, Elizabeth got in touch to say it's being hushed up. We're simply terrified of being called Islamophobic, and none more so than the governing party. She went on to say that the assassination of Sir David Amos was then told by his many people started talking about social media abuse, which was nothing to do with the cause of it.
That was quite peculiar. I mean, Frank has said people keep harping on about VAT. What needs to go is the whole green agenda. Well, I do think that, I mean, on Farage's show yesterday, some people were arguing that we need a referendum on net zero. I mean, I don't know what other people think about that. Please send us your views. Do you think we should have another referendum? Is it going to divide the country, or a necessary democratic decision for the society to make?
And on energy still, Philip gets in touch with this idea about a windfall tax. He says that a windfall tax is a stupid socialist ideology. Any government wastes money. A better idea would be to give energy companies a choice. Invest 40% of their profits in new production of energy resources, and only if they fail to invest, then tax them.
Well, very interesting. Keep your views coming. Fascinating stuff. Well, let's take another look at some of the stories we've been discussing on the show so far. So-called Black Thursday with Lettuce Bromonski, political commentator and contributor to Young Voices UK. Thank you for joining us this morning. I mean, what do you make of this so-called Black Thursday and the cost of living squeeze that many ordinary people are now facing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely terrifying what we're seeing. This cost of living crisis is set to cost an average family £2,853 a year. And we saw Rishi come out yesterday offering people £150 council tax rebate. I mean, that's just not enough. And if only it was just our energy bills and this Black Friday terrible day, but it's not. We've got inflation up at 5.4%, set to go to 7.25% in April. We've had fuel prices steadily increasing over the last 2 years during COVID. We've got our national insurance at 1.25% in April. People will be paying £250 more if you're on about £30,000. This is terrifying, and I think we're heading for a serious financial crash at this rate.
It certainly is worrying. But I wonder how much of this inflation was just the inevitable consequence of how much money was printed and pumped into our economy over the last 2 years. And is the solution, therefore, to this horrendous inflation that we're seeing right now to print yet more money, to give people yet more handouts? Surely that's going to push inflation higher still.
I mean, there is definitely no doubt that this is a consequence of the huge national borrowing and national debt that we've seen because of the pandemic, the highest level of borrowing we've seen since the 1930s. But I think that what the government needs to do is not print more money, but in fact turn around. The government this year collected significantly more tax than they had originally forecast. In fact, they collected around £13 billion more than they had forecast. And so I think what they've got to do is start cutting these VATs, particularly on energy bills. That was a promise that Boris put forward when he was on the Brexit campaign those years ago. He said one of his promises if we come out of Europe was that they would cut VAT on energy bills. And so that's what they need to start doing now going forward. These are the policies that they need to implement.
VAT, of course, is only 5% of energy bills rising by a lot more than 5%. I wonder, is this government a bit bankrupt of ideas in terms of producing energy? Where's the nuclear power? Where's the fracking, quite frankly? A lot of people are a bit timid about it, but I'll tell you what, I'd much rather someone frack on my street than have a 400, 500, 600, £700 increase in my energy bills.
Yes, I definitely think nuclear power is the future. We've got to become much less reliant on getting our foreign gas or our foreign energy bills from abroad. We've seen how Germany and France, they've been...
She was making a grand point. Let's get back to some of the comments that you've been sending in, because, of course, we do want to keep hearing from what you're saying. On energy, Alan has written in to ask about hydroelectric dams. He says they're the future. That's something that we didn't mention because we were talking about, what were we talking about? Fracking and nuclear. Potentially hydroelectric is a good one as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is a shame that we just lost Lettuce there because she's part of the group Young Voices. And I was going to ask her, I mean, as a young person as well, I mean, oftentimes when it's spoken about the green agenda, it's often said that we need to protect future generations. But actually, the young people of today are not necessarily being put in the forefront of the political conversation about the impact.
Oh, absolutely, especially if we're talking about things like national debt. It's not the taxpayers today that need to worry about that. National debt is just taxes on our children and taxes on young people in particular.
Yeah, and I mean, we talk about the right.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
If you are somebody that's paying student finance, you also have that garnished from your wages. So I think in terms of tax, and then on top of that, student finance, and now all of the increase in energy bills, I think young people are also another group that are quite vulnerable and will be hit incredibly hard by the cost of living crisis as well.
One further thing on energy, David has written in about this windfall tax, saying that do any of these clowns calling for a tax on energy companies realise they made huge losses 2 years ago? Did not see any government handout then. So looking at these things in the round, sometimes companies make money and sometimes they make losses. And if we always take away the times that they make money, then potentially these companies won't be there at all.
Yeah, and whilst I would be quite supportive of putting bigger pressure on these big corporations, we do have to remember that Amazon was perhaps essential during the pandemic to provide us for so many things that we needed. So I think, as you said, we have to look at it in the round in terms of the costs and the benefits.
Yeah. Well, after the break, hormone replacement therapy will be available over the counter without a doctor's prescription. A very interesting story there, but before that, let's look at this morning's news.
It's 11:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson has reportedly been hit by the resignation of a fifth advisor just hours after 4 senior aides quit last night. Conservative Home Editor Paul Goodman claims that Eleanor Narazanski has left her role as a special advisor in the policy unit. Yesterday, Boris Johnson lost his Chief of Staff, Principal Private Secretary, Director of Communications and Policy Chief. The Conservatives have won the Southend West by-election, prompted by the killing of Sir David Amess. The other major parties, Labour, the Liberal Democrats and the Greens, chose not to stand. That paved the way for Tory candidate Anna Firth to gain 86% of the vote. The Foreign Secretary is condemning reports that Russia is planning to fabricate an attack by Ukraine, giving President Vladimir Putin an excuse to invade. US reports claim Moscow planned to use a fake video of a Ukrainian military attack on Russian speakers. 95% of teachers say they've seen a rise in anxiety in their students since the start of the school year. In a poll by health charity Place to Be, many also reported higher levels of depression among school children. And 8 new stamps have been released by the Royal Mail to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee on Sunday. The set features photographs throughout the decades, illustrating her dedication to service and changing fashion over the years. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. We're back at the top of the hour with a full update. It's back to Anaya and Tom with To The Point in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning. It is 11:36 and this is To The Point with Anaya, Florian, Iman and Tom Harwood on GB News. We're live on your TV and your radio this morning.
Yes, well, the South China Morning Post have suggested that China and the UN are in a mutually convenient stalemate over the Xinjiang Human Rights Report. The publication claims that it has obtained documents that strongly suggest the UN's report has been ready for publication for quite some time.
Yeah, the UN's top human rights body has confirmed it would not publish the Xinjiang report before this month's Olympics, the opening ceremony of which is imminent. They say the investigation is ongoing.
Yes, joining us now is Professor Steve Shang, Director of the China Institute at SOAS University of London. Welcome to the show. He will be there in just a moment to give us some update on this. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, what do you make of the delay of this report?
Well, it is regrettable, but I don't think it's entirely surprising. The Chinese government does has a lot of clout and it used every resources at its disposal to make sure that the party in Beijing, the Winter Games, the Olympics, will not be spoiled.
What is potentially in this report that is trying to be hidden? Surely openness is a good point. I would imagine there's something within this report that that some people in positions of power are potentially afraid of.
Well, openness might be something that we like to think is normal and should be standard. Openness is something that the Chinese Communist Party does not do. Chinese Communist Party only tells you what they want you to hear. The issue really is in terms of why a major UN agency will defer to the Chinese government rather than make its own decision. But we're seeing that across a few UN agencies in the last few years, the Chinese government has been very successful in asserting influence over how some of the UN agencies operate.
So is this potentially to do with how much money the Chinese Communist Party is giving the UN? We've seen with other organisations, the World Health Organization, for example, similar things taking place. Is this simply a problem that we're seeing now, that many parts of the UN are simply bought by the Chinese government?
I don't think it is so much that they are being bought by money, because if you look at the amount of money the Chinese government gives to, say, the WHO compares to how much money is being given by, say, the United States, the US, now that they're returning, are giving much more money than the Chinese have been. And a lot of the time, even the UK gives more money than China does. But it is the way how the Chinese government engage with UN agencies, how they put their people in places, and how they get Chinese allies to sit on the boards of various UN agencies that get them to be able to exert the kind of influence they do. Western democracies are simply not paying the same level of attention to engage with the UN or UN agencies.
Yeah, and Professor, do you think China minds about this kind of mixed or even negative press in the run-up to the Winter Olympics? You mentioned that China isn't generally that bothered. It's quite happy to be seen as a closed society. Do you think that they mind about this?
Oh, they mind terribly. Xi Jinping does care about the image of China. The Communist Party generally cares about the image of China, and that's why they are going so far as to try to shape the narrative about China, not allowing anyone to project negative image of China. Now, they can't always control what the outside world says about China, but they are putting much more pressure than they used to, including putting pressure on Western journalists operating in China. They are now under huge amount of pressure in terms of their reporting, and they are being harassed on a regular basis as well.
The UK and many other Western countries are permanent members of the Security Council. Do you think that we should be putting more pressure to make sure that the report is released?
Well, I think we should get the UN to function as the UN was meant to be functioned by design, which does means that we have to uphold some of the basic principles that we are dedicated to. So yes, the short answer is we should. Reality is that we are not doing enough.
It's interesting seeing the trajectory of China. At some point in the next decade, potentially 2 decades, it will eclipse the United States as the world's predominant economy. Do you think the world is ready for the sort of economic centre of the world to swing somewhere other than an Anglospheric nation? We've been used to the last 200 years of either Britain or America being the predominant economic force in this world. And for the first time in over 2 centuries, it will no longer be one of those countries. It's going to be a very different world that we live in a not very long time at all.
Well, you have made a very heroic assumptions that the Chinese economy will continue to grow at the rate that it has has been growing in the last 20 or 40 years, if that trajectory holds, then your predictions will come true. But that assumption may not hold. The very high rate of growth, nearly 10% over the last 30, 40 years, was unprecedented in human history. China's already, in that sense, delivered an economic miracle. Whether that economic miracle can be sustained for another 20 years, I think is a very, very big question. If that doesn't happen, then this scenario will not necessarily happen. And let's also not forget that if we go all the way back to, say, about 1830, China accounted for something like over 1/3 of global output. It was in fact greater than Queen Victoria's England at the time.
Very, very interesting, of course. From 1830 onwards, the genesis of the Industrial Revolution, of course, Britain grew much faster and China stagnated. But it's so interesting that, of course, the last 30 or 40 years in China, it's after they opened their markets, embraced capitalism, there's been that sort of miracle. I wonder if there are lessons there. But for now, Steve Tsang, thank you very much for joining us, Director, of course, of the China Institute at SOAS, University of London. Really interesting conversation there. It's important that we cover geopolitics on this programme.
I think it is quite interesting that we often talk about or worry about the rise of China, but many of the things that Western countries could do in order to actually, for example, bring manufacturing here. We talked about energy and build up our own productivity. There seems to be quite a significant reluctance to do those things as well. So,
but also, I think it is relatively inevitable that much more of our lives, much more of our economic lives in particular, will be moving east. And we need to prepare for a world. I don't think we're quite there, and I worry that the West might be in some sort of denial and potentially decline.
Well, I think it is often very inward-looking right now, so maybe we need to be thinking about really bolstering our foreign policy and our position on the world stage. But
Well, moving on to something a little more parochial. Hormone replacement therapy will now be available over the counter without a doctor's prescription in order to make it more accessible to women going through the menopause.
It comes as an inaugural meeting of the UK Menopause Task Force took place with the aim to increase access to treatment and end the stigma surrounding the change.
But does HRT help or simply postpone the hot flushes, headaches and mood swings of menopause?
We're joined now by Dr. Martin Kinsella, an aesthetic and hormone doctor in Cheshire. Thank you for joining us. I mean, what do you think about it being made more accessible by making it over the counter? Do you think that's a right decision?
Well, firstly, if you look at the actual facts are, I think it's a proposition made by the MHRA, they're the UK medicines regulator, and what they're proposing to do is make Gina 10, now Gina 10 over the counter. Gina 10 is basically a tablet containing a form of estrogen that's delivered locally into the vagina to treat vaginal dryness. Vaginal dryness affects lots of women going through the change in the menopause. While I applaud or agree with the increased awareness, while I'm all for women being able to get more understanding about the menopause and having better access to care, there definitely are some concerns about making hormones available over the counter. Firstly, I believe pharmacists will be trained to identify people and use checklists, but unfortunately, there may be things that there could be dangers with this. There could be certain things underlying that are missed. So there might be changes to causing vaginal dryness or atrophy that are not hormone related, such as there are dermatological conditions like lichen planus that potentially even things like cancers could be masked or missed. And also hormone imbalances throughout the body can also go unchecked. So I think that's the first issue. And also, if this is the first medication that could potentially be available over the counter, once we've started with that opens a door to other hormones and other types of HRT being available. And hormones are some of the most powerful molecules in your body, and any type of medication that's designed to replace or replicate what they do has huge impacts both on the physiology and the runnings of our body. I feel that for that type of treatment, it really needs to be done under medical supervision. Blood tests need to be taken, levels need to be done, and really hormones need to be more tailored and given in a more tailored, customized, bespoke fashion to patients.
Is there a worry here if there's this kind of medical gatekeeping, that we're not trusting people enough to, if they feel something is wrong, going to seek that help, and of course encouraging people to talk to doctors. But the fact that something should be able for an individual to buy, if it's about that individual's own body, isn't there a point of principle here that we should be leaning more towards allowing people to do what they want?
Partly, as long as it's safe. These are like I said, this is Eastern that's given locally. This can help with vaginal dryness and vaginal atrophy if it is hormone-related vaginal atrophy. Those kind of things need to be assessed by medically trained professionals to assess that first. So I am all for increased access, increased awareness. Menopause is a serious problem. It affects the quality of life of millions of women in this country, and we need to have a better understanding. But promoting the idea of allowing women to go and self-diagnose, or making them feel like they have to then self-diagnose to get care. What we should be doing is investing in better education to both the patients and the menopause doctors and GPs. We should be reducing the stigma and taboo of this problem so that they can talk to doctors and have better access to the medical professionals, rather than, as I said, making women feel like they have to self-diagnose their problems and start self-treating, because that is where problems will start to happen.
And finally, Dr. Kinsella, I mean, this is hopefully trying to raise awareness of some of the issues that many older women face. I mean, but do you think that enough is done as a society to raise awareness of and think about some of the issues that women face as they get older?
Well, it's a very good question. I think definitely. I think certainly when it comes to the hormone changes, I mean, hormones have a huge impact on our body, and also, the effects of aging in general. I think we seem to we always think of aging as something that just happens to us, but actually there are certain mechanics and medical things that are going on within our cells, the hormone changes, all sorts of problems that really do affect older people generally, and especially women with the menopause. And like I said, I think we should definitely increase the awareness. I think that we need to have better education on this. I think there needs to be some much better support mechanisms in place for women going through these changes, but it has to be done in a safe manner. And there needs to be a better education and understanding about hormones and things that are happening to the body.
Well, Dr. Martin Kinsella, thank you very much for your views this morning. It's a really interesting issue and something that I think people really, really care about at home.
Yes, thank you. Well, let's go back to geopolitics. US officials claim they have evidence of a Russian plot to make a very graphic fake video of a Ukrainian attack to justify their invasion.
Yes, the footage would allegedly show fake bodies, fake explosives, fake Ukrainian military hardware, and actors playing fake mourning families. That's according to US officials.
Yes, these claims are being made amid rising tensions between Russia, the US and its allies as Russian military builds up along Ukraine's border. Sergei Sumleny is a political analyst and an expert on Eastern Europe. He joins us now. Thank you for joining us. I mean, what do you make of this claim by US intelligence officials? I presume that Russia would vehemently deny this, but do you think that this is an accurate claim that is being made?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, we know, thank you for inviting me. We know that among political experts who take care of Russia and what Russia does, there is a joke that don't believe the fact before Kremlin denies it. Kremlin always denies what they do, that what they are what they're best in, and Kremlin clearly fakes evidences of something. They want to use a pretext for their military interventions. We remember a lot of fake news provided by Kremlin, video footages, interviews with fake persons in 2014, as they wanted to claim that Ukraine allegedly killed civilians in eastern parts of Ukraine, that children have been killed. We all remember the fake report on allegedly crucified 5-year-old boy on the eyes of his mom, and like the whole village had to witness it. It was completely invented by Russia Today, and they have broadcasted it. Has never been denied by Russia Today, never been they have never said, sorry, we have faked it. It's what they do. And that is a very long tradition of Russian propaganda and of Soviet propaganda. Just remember, as the Soviet Union was about to attack Finland, they have killed their own soldiers and said that it were Finland who have shelled the Soviet position. They were ready to kill own personnel. I'm sure they will be ready to do this now.
But if they were to really do this, how many people would genuinely believe in the 21st century this sort of thing? I can imagine it would be easier to get away with faking these incursions or these situations, as many countries did in the 20th century and earlier, these sort of false flag attacks as a pretext for war. Are we, with all of our technology today and our ability to spot false things, would they really get away with it?
It's not really important how many people will believe in that. It's important first how many people will be ready to repeat the lie. And for example, many politicians in Germany, starting from far left, the left party, up to neo-Nazis, for example, far right party, AfD, Alternative for Germany, would be happy to repeat this lie because that would strengthen their position. They would say, look, the Americans used to do that and that in Iraq, or they have invented something like that. Now Russians say that. We don't know the truth. And the second is important that Russian object is never to persuade somebody. A Russian object is to distort the discussion and to create the feeling of uncertainty. Like, we don't know what is the truth. They say one thing, and others say another thing, and we don't know the truth. That is what they did with MH17, as it was crystal clear that it were Russians who shot down the plane. They continued to spread all possible versions, and the versions of very different kind, just to spoil the discussion.
Yes, they'll spread contradictory arguments, just so long as there are more arguments out there and the waters are muddied. It's a fascinating strategy, a Kremlinology, looking at what Russia is doing. As Winston Churchill once called them, a riddle wrapped in a puzzle inside a mystery. And it continues to be the case. Sergei Samleny, thank you very much for joining us on To The Point this morning.
Yes, and finally, yesterday was the South and West by-election held after the death of the sitting MP Sir David Amess last year. The Conservatives have retained the seat, with Anne Firth winning with 12,792 votes.
But with a low turnout of 24% and over 1,000 spoilt ballots, with messages, for example, saying to Boris things like, do a Brexit and get out. What does this result mean for the Tories and their voters in Southend-on-Sea? Well, our South East of England reporter Ellie Costello was there this morning to find out.
Hello from a very wet and windy Leigh-on-Sea in Essex. And if you haven't been to Leigh-on-Sea before, it is a fantastic place to be. It's where you come for your seafood in Essex. There's a row of shops and restaurants just down there that are usually bustling with people. This is a very busy town, usually full of affluent families and also commuters. We're only about 45 minutes from London on a train, and this is a very family-orientated, lovely town to be in. In fact, in 2018, this was voted the happiest place to live in the UK. So we're not only here because it's a lovely place to be, but also because yesterday there was the Southend West by-election, which is where Leigh-on-Sea sits. And this was a seat that was left vacant by Sir David Amess, the MP that was fatally stabbed in October of last year. And that was an event that completely shocked this community to the core. This is a really tight-knit community, and speaking to people this morning, that is still an event that has left them reeling. Now, yesterday in the by-election, the major opposition parties pulled out in a sign of respect to Sir David. So Labour, Lib Dems and the Greens didn't have a candidate standing. They wanted this seat to go to the Conservative candidate, and that's exactly what happened. Anna Firth is now the new Conservative MP for Southend West. She won with just over 12,000 votes. It was a very low turnout though, just 24%. So I've been speaking to people this morning about why that was. Now, some were saying that because the opposition parties pulled out, it was very obvious who was going to win. This seat has been a Tory seat since 1950, since its conception. So it's very clear that Anna Firth was going to win this election and they did not need to turn out to vote. Others said they were very annoyed by the behaviour of the Conservative Party. They didn't want to vote for the Conservatives, so decided to stay away. And what is very interesting is There are reports that over 1,000 of the ballot papers were spoilt yesterday. And the PA news agency is saying that some of the ballot papers had writing on it saying that Boris needs to do a Brexit and just leave. Others were writing about Partygate on their ballot papers. So obviously, in that sense alone, there is a lot of frustration here about Partygate and about the behaviour of the Conservative Party. So perhaps another reason why that turnout was so low was because people were expressing their frustration with the Conservative Party and they would rather stay away than vote for them. Now, on the front pages of the local papers today, the focus is very much on the legacy of Sir David. His daughter Kate has been in the local papers talking about Southend becoming a city, and that is what is going to happen in February. And yesterday, last night, Anna Firth, who is the new Conservative MP for Southend West, was speaking about Sir David's legacy, and she said she would honour his legacy and would continue his commitment to the new city of Southend.
Really lovely legacy there, having Southend finally becoming a city. Ellie Costello, thank you very much for that report.
Yes, well, that's it. Over here from To The Point, but don't go away. Up next is Isabel Oakeshott for The Briefing. Thank you.
Hello again. It is an awful lot colder out there today. A stiff, fresh wind bringing a mixture of sunshine and showers. And those showers are wintry, particularly over western Scotland, where snow showers will continue through the day. This cold front has swept across the country overnight, clearing from East Anglia and the southeast by around about lunchtime. Introduced the colder air, and it's still windy out there as well, and that wind bringing a lot of showers into Northern Ireland, western Scotland. Snow here down to low levels at times, building up over some of the higher routes, particularly in western Scotland. For Northern England, a mixture of hail, sleet and snow in the showers here, along with North Wales. But further south and east, not too many showers, many places dry and bright with some winter sunshine, but it is cold. Certainly a lot colder than recent days. Add on that wind, that gusty, gusty wind, and it feels even colder. And that wind will continue to bring more snow showers over western Scotland this evening. The potential for some disruption, especially on some of the higher routes as the snow could start to build up. But elsewhere, the wintry showers do tend to ease this evening. For many, it'll be dry across the south and east, certainly dry as we head into the weekend. But it will be cold with temperatures close to freezing, even in towns and cities. Some sunshine then early on across the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast, but cloud and rain will move back in across the north with some further snow across Scotland, intending to rain at low levels through the day. And we'll see that rain on and off for Northern Ireland, Northern England, Wales throughout the afternoon. Further south and east, most places dry, turning milder again, but not feeling all that mild with the strong wind. And the cold weather returns to northern Scotland through Saturday afternoon. And again here on Saturday night, snow showers could cause some further disruption on the higher routes especially. We'll keep the cloud and rain across much of northern England and Wales as we head into Sunday morning. Sunday, again, staying pretty mixed, staying windy with wintry showers across the north, a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain in the south.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9